And now let's turn to issues that are facing urban planners as they shape the next city. The University of Sydney is hosting an event this month looking at planning for a new energy and climate future. Industry leaders are joining scholars and international academics on policy makers. Among the issues being discussed is transport, and one of the participants is Armando Carbonell, the chairman of the Department of Planning and Urban Form at the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy. He joins me in the studio now. Armando Carbonell, thanks very much for coming in and talking to us. This is just a brief visit to Sydney, I take. Can I ask you for your impressions that you've gained here in the Australian context? Does somebody like you get a sense of the pulse, the heartbeat of a city in a short visit here?
Well, it may be a hallucination based on jet lag, but as someone who travels quite a lot, I do find that those initial perceptions are very strong. And before I had a chance to recover yesterday as I arrived, I had time to do a 3-hour walk around the waterfront of Sydney, and my impressions are what a magnificent setting, what an interesting city from a point of view of architectural history and the mix of architectural styles, but also some of the real potential of the waterfront to be regenerated through new development and reuse of some of the existing fabric and structures. And I saw this happening already in places like, I guess it's the Walsh development, very impressive use of existing industrial buildings, warehouses, residential, theaters, mixed use, a beautiful setting. I think Sydney has the potential to absorb considerable population in a way that will be very sustainable in terms of how people move around, how they live. And it has the attractiveness, the desirability, I think, to actually bring people to the city.
Well, the nub of the question, though, is the term you just used, potential,
yeah.
And whether a city has potential, whether a city is healthy or whether it is sclerotic.
Yes.
in its nature.
Yes, and you know what we're seeing, and there also is a sort of a set of trends around changing urban development patterns. In most of the rest of the world, cities are getting less dense. They're losing population, they're growing outwards. New development is at much lower densities than in the past. And this is a considerable challenge for us as the whole world becomes more urbanized. But a few cities, and some might surprise you, but Sydney is one that has been stable and starting to grow in density. And I think this is evidence that there's more than just potential here, that there actually is a trend. Los Angeles, quite surprisingly, is another, surprisingly for most people, a city which had its highest density many years ago, but now is growing back, as is Sydney, and actually investing in urban transportation systems that make a lot of sense to serve this more intense population.
And that is the challenge, I take it. Certainly in the Australian context, we hear about the need to increase urban density, but how do you also plan around that without bulldozing vast tracts of established population centres in order to create the transport corridors?
That's right, and absolutely that's not desired. I think the idea is to adapt, reuse, and fill in the spaces. I saw a lot of empty, underutilized land around the harbour, especially coming back into the Darling Harbour side. I think there's room for thousands of residential units without tearing down things. And I saw some very nice examples of the adaptive reuse of existing structures which permit more density in places where people hadn't even lived in the past at all.
Okay. One significant change that is happening here in a city like Sydney, it's received a lot of publicity, it's been the decision to tear down our monorail, which is a fairly unique form of people mover, public transport around the world. Can I ask you for your reaction to that?
My reaction is, I wish somebody had told me that before this, because I was admiring it. It's a unique structure, and it looked to be working. So I'll need to find out more about this, but I'm surprised at that, and I hope it'll be replaced by something equally functional.
Okay, Armando Carbonell, thank you very much for coming in. We have to leave it there, but I hope the conference underway in Sydney is a fruitful one. Thank you.
Great pleasure. Thank you, David.